This is how Swede speaks.
Recently, it was revealed that the Swedish YouTuber Angriff is labeled a threat in a report from a Swedish government agency, the Swedish Contingencies Agency. Earlier, the same agency has discussed with a British organization whether they should spy on a previous member of Sweden's parliament, now living in Hungary. And Poole has again called Sweden a creepy country, commenting on the case with ASAP Rocky. What's going on in Sweden? That's what we will address in this video. Before we get started, I want to thank all of my financial supporters. This is my day job. Without you, this channel would not be possible. I also want to ask you to check out my website at swedespeaks.com and to follow me on BitChute. There are links in the box below, and you know, better safe than sorry. So make sure to check that out. So, as I said, a Swedish government agency called the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency labels Angriff, a Swedish YouTuber, a threat. And a few months ago, the same government agency discussed with a British organization about the possibility of spying on Kent Ekeroth, who lives in Hungary and who previously was a member of the Swedish Parliament for the Sweden Democrats. Also, commenting on the ASAP Rocky case, Poole recently uploaded a video called "Sweden is creepy and Trump needs to get ASAP Rocky out of there." I agree that Sweden is creepy, but where does this come from? To understand the Swedish creepiness, we have to take a quick look at Sweden's history. Historically, Sweden has been a rural society, where a large majority of the Swedes lived in villages on the countryside and not in cities. In these villages, it was very important to belong to the village fellowship and to not be different in any way. This created a basis for groupthink. The groupthink tendencies were strengthened in the 1500s when Gustav I, or Gustav Vasa, became king of Sweden, centralized the country, imposed a state church, robbed churches and brutally crushed regional riots against his policies. Later, during the years 1668 until 1676, Sweden was plagued with witch processes. There was a witch hunt going on. Children witnessed against adults, mainly women but sometimes also men, and people were burned as witches in Sweden. For instance, on the picture that you're looking at right now, depicting the witch processes in the small town of Mora. So, do you think that the witch hunt is over now and that Swedes have freed themselves of groupthink? Well, then you have to think again. Sweden is no longer ruled by kings and it doesn't have a state church, at least not formally. Instead, politicians now run the Church of Sweden, which used to be the Swedish Lutheran State Church. But due to this mentality of conformism and groupthink, Swedes have been very easy to rule, and they still are. Once the Social Democrats had conquered the minds of the Swedes, they were able to fill the role that kings and priests previously had occupied. The Social Democrats, with help from politicians in other parties, were able to create a heavily politicized society that is interconnected in many ways. Conformism and groupthink met social democracy and left-wing ideas, and Sweden turned into the closest thing to a socialist country in the West. When I grew up in Sweden in the 1980s, I basically grew up in a softer version of East Germany. And, by the way, a lot of the teachers that we had in the 1980s and later had been going to East Germany to study their school system. Many teachers considered East Germany a good example to be followed. And this all plays into what is going on in Sweden today. If Poole wants to understand how Sweden got that creepy, he should watch this video. In his video, Poole talked about how Swedish reporters advised him not to go to Rinkeby, a no-go zone in Stockholm, and after he went there, he was smeared by the Swedish mainstream media as a liar, including my media whose own reporters had told him to not go to Rinkeby, because Swedes can sometimes say things when they are between four eyes, or when they talk to foreigners. But the groupthink makes it almost impossible for a Swede to say what he really thinks in a larger crowd of people. Some Swedes have spoken up, and it has had real-life consequences for them. Sweden is not like the United States. Swedes do not have freedom of speech. In theory, they do, but not in practice. Let me give you one example. Back in 2017, Jan Sjunnesson, who describes himself as an independent Sweden friend, was fired from his job as a substitute teacher. He was fired after his students had Googled him and told the school where he worked that he had been involved with the Sweden Democrats. The temp agency that he worked for also said that they could no longer keep him. Why? Because he challenged the groupthink. And Mr. Gunnarsson had been fired from similar jobs before, and I know that he has been fired from jobs after that due to his political opinions. There are many other cases like Jan Gunnarsson. I know about several. It has usually not been the government per se going after people. It has usually been, like in Jan Gunnarsson's case, with students reporting him for his opinions, although he has said that he does not use the classroom to spread Sweden Democrat ideas. Let me just mention here that most of my teachers during high school in Sweden used the classroom to spread leftist ideas, but I suppose it's okay when they do it. Anyway, the groupthink usually works through individuals going after other individuals for wrongthink. In many cases, left-wing activists have called up employers to tell them about the opinions of their employees, no matter what jobs these employers had. It has created a culture of fear in Sweden, fear of publicly saying the wrong thing. But these recent cases that I now want to address actually involve a government agency, the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency. This agency wrote a report in which they single out the YouTuber Angriff as a threat. In the report they write, quote, "A video on the 5th of September 2018 shows a discussion between Watson and Swedish YouTube personality Angriff unquote. By Watson they mean Paul Joseph Watson. They continue, quote, "Although the video is purported to be a discussion around the Swedish election, most of the discussion focuses more broadly on the decline of Swedish society as a potential explanation for an increase in support for the Sweden Democrats. This is characteristic of the far-right smear campaign, a phenomenon largely separate from objectives about Sweden itself. The conversation revolves around the negative impact that migrant communities have on the economy through wage stagnation, violent crime committed by migrants, a recent report outlining convicted rapist statistics, and supposed cultural displacement caused by a growing migrant population," unquote. Angriff is pointed out as a disinformant in the report. In the report they write, quote, "Alt-right YouTube influencers in Sweden primed the ground for claims of election fraud. The Angriff, real name Enari Blatte Talar, is a Bosnian-Swedish YouTuber who vlogs about social issues in Sweden," unquote. Did you just notice that they pointed out his ethnicity? What does that have to do with this? Also, his real name is not Enari Blatte Talar. Enari Blatte Talar is his Swedish YouTube name, which he has translated roughly to Angriff. I also noticed that he talked about alt-right. I don't think they know what alt-right means. Alt-right means racists, pure and simple. People like Richard Spencer, the one who coined the expression and who is an actual national socialist, a Nazi. As far as I know, Angriff is not alt-right. And they talk about claims of election fraud. Maybe I should remind you that before the Swedish election last fall, I made a video called "Can Sweden's elections be trusted?" And after election, I made another video called "Was there election fraud in Sweden?" So I am also one of those YouTubers who have discussed this. Anyway, Angriff was interviewed by the Swedish alternative media site Samnytt about this. The reporter from Samnytt asked Angriff the following question, quote, "The state forces you to pay through taxes for a report where you are pictured as a threat. How does it feel?" unquote. Angriff responded, quote, "Like politicians hate regular people. As a taxpayer I am unable to get access to psychiatric care when I need it the most, but the state can afford to label me as a foreign threat because I use democracy. So we have priorities there, really," unquote. Then the reporter asked Angriff, quote, "The report is ordered and controlled in detail by the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency. The work is led by the head of division, Mikael Tovesson, who is believed to become a head of the future Swedish psychological defense. How do you think that this appointment will influence Swedish democracy?" unquote. Angriff then responded, quote, "In a very brown direction, so to speak, but it is pretty expected when you follow my YouTube channel, which probably is why they want to smear it. I prove in an ironic way that regular people know better than elites. My latest video is exactly about how PC culture sponsored by the Swedish left, is a part of post-war propaganda. So I am hardly the Russian threat here. It's identity politics and goodness oppression, unquote. And by goodness oppression, Angriff is obviously referring to virtue signaling, and in a brown direction means in a fascist direction. And you know, Angriff is not my favorite YouTuber. I really didn't like his attack on Peter Sweden last year, and I did not like his follow-up attack on Christians. But for now, that's besides the point. There is more talk about it when it comes to the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency, an agency that, according to themselves, quote, is responsible for issues concerning civil protection, public safety, emergency management and civil defense as long as no other authority has responsibility, unquote. Back in April this year, it was revealed that this agency had discussed with a British organization called Institute for Strategic Dialogue whether this organization should spy on Kent Ekeroth, living in Hungary and the previous member of the Swedish Parliament for the Sweden Democrats. In an email from last year to the agency, the British organization wrote, among other things, quote, "We started to uncover some offline links between the Swedish far right and Hungary, for example with some extreme right influencers from Sweden moving to Hungary, where their views are more acceptable in the political climate, Kent Ekeroth being the most obvious example. But to uncover more about these links, we would have to engage in more offline investigative journalism work, which fell slightly out of the remit of the project. Even today, there was news about the repressive treatment of Hungarian journalist Andras Deso for uncovering news about a notorious con woman who has been charged in Sweden, unquote." After which they add a link to a tweet. The British organization, Institute for Strategic Dialogue, continues their email, quote, "I believe there would be lots to uncover in terms of offline links, support and potentially financial backing connecting Hungarian and Swedish far-right movements. It was not something we were able to cover ourselves in any detail, but many journalists have started to see a real infrastructure of support built in Hungary to support these kind of international movements, both in elections and outside of elections. Let me know if I can provide any more information on that. In terms of a follow-up call, how would Monday the 12th or Tuesday the 13th of November be for your team? Thanks, Chloe," unquote. First of all, I don't think they know what far-right means. They're just lumping together anyone who is to the right of political correctness and labeling them far-right. By the way, Kent Ekeroth's mother is Jewish, from Kazakhstan. But apart from that, how about this? A Swedish government agency calls a YouTuber a threat, including pointing out that he is not ethnically Swedish. The same agency discusses spying on a previous member of parliament, now living abroad. How about that? This is the obvious result of the creepy groupthink of Sweden, and the witch hunt is still going on. And that's what I have to say about this. So what do you think? Comment below. And if you like this video, I really appreciate any donations. Even $1 makes a difference. If everyone who watched this channel gave $1, it would transform this channel. Just take a look at the links below. But if you really can't financially support this channel, I would be very grateful if you would share a link to one of your favorite videos from this channel on your social media, because ad revenue also helps. Also, make sure to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Most importantly, please pray for this channel. And check out my live stream on Saturday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 11:30 p.m. Central European Time. Until next time, have a nice day, thank you for watching and God bless.